Good evening, folks. You're listening to the Justinio Reads podcast. Tonight, we'll be recounting some disturbing tales about the mysterious men in black. Who or what are these strange beings? And why do they pretend to be human when they obviously aren't? Tonight, let's take a look at just some of the few cases throughout the years. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. The Vanishing Coin. Dr. Herbert Hopkins was working as a consultant on a UFO case in Maine. One evening, he received a phone call from someone purporting to be an activist in the UFO community, asking him if he could visit Hopkins to discuss the case.
Good evening, Dr. Hopkins. Could I come over to discuss the UFO case?
Only minutes later, the man arrived. The man was wearing a black suit and black tie, and had very unusual facial appearances, with no hair or eyebrows and an extremely pale figure. Hopkins' dog began barking erratically the minute the man entered the home.
Tell me what you know about these UFO cases.
After the bizarre visitor was finished questioning him about the UFO case, the visit got even stranger. Here's how it went, according to the night sky.
There are 2 coins in your pocket.
The man in black informed Hopkins that there were 2 coins in Hopkins' pocket, which was correct, and asked him to remove one. Hopkins complied and held the coin, a shiny new penny, in the palm of his hand.
Now, watch closely.
The man in black told Hopkins to watch the coin closely. After a few moments, the coin took on a silvery appearance, and then appeared to be going out of focus. It then began to fade and eventually disappeared altogether. The man in black informed Hopkins that the coin would never be seen on this plane again. He then inquired as to whether Hopkins was familiar with alleged UFO abductee Barney Hill. Hopkins replied that he had heard of Hill, but was under the impression that he had died in the not-too-distant past.
That is correct.
The man in black informed Hopkins that was correct.
Barney didn't have a heart, just like you don't have a coin.
Barney didn't have a heart, said the man in black, just like you no longer have a coin. It should be noted that Barney Hill actually died of a cerebral hemorrhage. The man in black then gently suggested that Hopkins destroy any material he had related to the UFO case.
Mr. Hopkins, I implore you destroy any files you have with the UFO cases. Good day.
Hopkins, extremely shaken by the encounter, followed the advice of the man and burned all the files he had related to the case. While he had repeated phone troubles after, the phone company said his line had been tampered with, maybe to tap it, but he never saw the man again. Telepathic silence. Albert K. Bender, born June 16, 1921 to March 29, 2016. Author of the 1962 nonfiction book Flying Saucers and the Three Men, was a UFOologist. He served in the United States Army Air Forces during World War II. He was obsessed with the UFO phenomenon and became a UFO researcher, founding the International Flying Saucers Bureau. In 1965, he founded the Max Steiner Music Society. Albert K. Bender founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau, or the IFSB, the first major civilian UFO club in the world, in 1952. Although the organization was a success at first, he suddenly shut it down in 1953. Bender later told that in March 1953, he had been approached by 3 men in black. These men visited him in his house and communicated with him telepathically. He received a metal disc from them and instruction. He reported that he felt like he was being transported. These men apparently shared insights into the nature and origin of UFOs with Bender. Afterwards, he became ill and didn't eat for 3 days. As a result of the visitation, Bender felt encouraged to share what he had seen with other UFO investigators, but was refused. Bender suffered frequent headaches after the 3 men visited him, and his co-workers reported that he seemed scared. His alleged experiences were recorded in They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers by Gray Barker, Bender's IFSB associate. Bender's experience formed the legend of the Men in Black. Bender did not speak of the event for 9 years. In 1962, Bender wrote Flying Saucers and the Three Men to tell his own story. In the book, Bender recounts that the Men in Black were from another planet. Barker published his book, but there is speculation that Bender's experience was only a dream. Bender went on to manage a motel in California. Bender was not the first one, however, to report visitations to UFO researchers from Men in Black. Bender reported that he had a second supernatural encounter. He was visited by 3 shadowy figures. They did not touch the floor, but hovered above it. They told him that their human appearance was an illusion. And that whatever information he told people about their visitation would not be believed. They supposedly told him that they captured people from Earth and used their bodies to disguise themselves. Space Review was the official magazine about UFOlogy news at that time in 1953. Late in the summer of 1953, Bender made a series of discoveries which led him to believe that he had finally found the truth to the UFO cover-up. He had planned to reveal his findings in the October issue of the Space Review, but before the issue was published, Bender was visited by 3 men dressed in black who had already read the unpublished report and confirmed his findings.
Bender, we understand you have findings.
The silencers, as he called them, scared Bender to the point where he did not publish the report, but left a warning. We advise those engaged in saucer work to please be very cautious. Bender then suspended publishing on his publication and dissolved the IFSB. Oh, hey! You enjoying the show so far? Consider supporting the podcast. It's only 99 cents a month. My bag of marshmallows costs more than that. I need more marshmallows. Help me get more marshmallows, and I'll keep this story train a-going. Deal? Just go to bit.ly/JR support. That's bit.ly/JR support. Alrighty then, back to the show.
Hey! Get off my goddamn marshmallow, you son of a bitch. Hey, come back here.
The real Men in Black. Let me start by saying, I'm going to sound crazy. Hell, even I think I sound crazy. You know that feeling you get when something you never imagined would happen to you happens? That inexplicable feeling of shock? That's what I'm feeling right now. I don't expect you to believe me. It's likely no one ever will, but I needed something, somewhere, that would explain what happened to me if things came to the worst. So, dear listeners, this is my story for you. I was never the type for scary stories. I'm afraid to admit that I get scared easily, and that sometimes I exaggerate things. Even now, I'm trying to convince myself that is the case in all of this. It started a little over a week ago. My boyfriend and I had a huge fight one night over his inability to juggle spending time with me and our son versus his work. He's a major lawyer in Washington, D.C., and his work has him constantly busy, most nights being spent in a hotel during the week rather than just coming home. We'd had a good night up until that point, as we were coming home from a long overdue dinner with just the two of us. The fight in the car got pretty heated, ending with both of us zoning into our own world as I stared out the passenger side window while he drove, his eyes never leaving the road in front of him. To be fair, deep in my own thoughts, I didn't notice it at first, what I was looking at. My head was cloudy and hazy-like, almost as if I was in a trance. It wasn't until Jake shook my arm, panicked, as I brought back to reality. That's when I saw it. I was confused at first, wondering what I was looking at. Jake had brought the car to a complete stop next to a large field in a neighboring town from our own. The field at first sight appeared empty, just another old cornfield. But instead of a feeling of ease at the familiarity, my stomach twisted, unease settling in the pit of my stomach. A quick glance at the sky, and I realized that the usually star-filled galaxy was incredibly bare, pitch black. Figuring there was some sort of eclipse or something, I'm not much of an astronomy person, I shook it off. But the feeling of unease remained. Just as I was about to turn back to Jake, I heard the door of the car open, and before I could stop him, Jake was running out of the car towards the field, his eyes transfixed on something that seemed to draw him in. Quickly unbuckling my seatbelt, I hopped out of the car, running after him as quickly as I could in the incredibly uncomfortable heels I'd chosen for that night. I just about nearly twisted both my ankles when Jake stopped, just at the edge of the cornfield, making my following easy as I finally caught up to him. I stared at him incredulously, the shock and confusion making it difficult to speak. "Jake, what are you doing? Come on, let's just go home." I frantically grabbed at his arm, the look on his face unsettling me. His eyes were dark instead of their usual clear blue, and he looked right past me as if I didn't even exist. He stood entirely still, not moving an inch as I prodded more, Jake, you're scaring me. Please, let's just go home. The babysitter has to leave by midnight. Let's just go, please. I was desperate now, pulling at him with all my might, but his legs were rooted to the ground like trees. Much to my relief, he finally opened his mouth to speak, his voice just a whisper.
Kayla, look at that field. Do you see the glint? That really small light? What is that?
Reluctantly, I turned, glancing toward the direction he was facing. I didn't see anything but the darkness and the corn stalks in the ground. I shifted back to Jake, confused. Honey, there's nothing there. Let's just... But before I could finish, Jake took off again, this time disappearing into the field. Cursing, I slipped off my heels and bolted after him, each lash of corn flipping wildly as I attempted to keep up to his pace. He eventually slowed, and I could feel the sense of panic in my stomach heighten. Just as I reached him, the corn stalks gave way to a small clearing in the middle of the field. And I'll never forget, never in my entire life, forget what was in the middle of that field. I was the first to move towards it. Both of us were silent as I crept forward, until I was inches from the metal that embedded itself in the ground. It was massive, dear listeners. I'm telling you, in my entire 28 years, I've never seen anything I couldn't explain like this. In the middle of this cornfield was a large metal object. It was shaped almost like a plane, but there was something off about it. The metal itself emitted a light red glow, barely visible unless you were close to it. It wasn't circular like everything you might have read on this stuff. I might have thought it was a jet if I hadn't seen it myself. There were no windows anywhere on this thing, no visible doors. In fact, really no visible ways of moving out of whatever it was. My hand reached forward to touch it, almost like a moth drawn to a flame. I couldn't fight it. But before I could feel anything, a ringing sounded in my ears, startling me enough to throw me backwards, my hands cupping my head. We were discovered the next morning. The babysitter had called the police when we didn't show up back at home, and they found our car on the side of the road. The police said that when they found us, we were sitting in a fetal position on the ground, just staring into space. I don't remember any of it. Now, I'm the type of person to try to forget this kind of thing. Despite Jake's pushing from his curiosity, I refused to talk about it, letting it slip from my mind. But when I sleep, it all comes back to me. I'm waking up every night, screaming. I don't know why. I never remember the dreams. All I know is that they terrify me enough that I spent the rest of the night awake, shaking in my own bed. I thought about seeing a therapist, but it wasn't until today that I really, truly believed I was in any danger. Just yesterday morning, as Jake left for work, I was feeding my son. It was a mostly normal morning, nothing abnormal at all, until they came. Around 9 a.m., there was a knock at the door. At the time, it didn't seem odd how mechanical it sounded. Every knock to the exact same beat. Striding to the front door, I opened it to two men, both dressed in black suits, with long black coats and hats on their head.
Good morning, ma'am.
They were both incredibly pale, the palest skin I'd ever seen. At first, I studied their faces, and fear started to creep into my stomach. These men had the exact same face, down to every line. There were no eyebrows, which struck me as odd, and the little bit of hair they did have didn't look real at all. But what got me the most were the eyes. The eyes were big, way too big, almost like something out of the cartoons you see on television. But as they stared at me, I could hear them speaking to me.
Can we speak to you privately?
Asking to talk to me privately and let them in my house. Without thinking, I let them in slowly, almost as if I wasn't controlling myself. Here's the biggest problem, listeners. I don't remember anything past that. I don't know what they asked me. I don't even know when they left. All I know is that every time I try to remember, it's fuzzy, and a headache forms at full force. When I think of what I could have said, a remarkable fear comes over me, a sense of foreboding. I don't think I'm supposed to tell anyone, but I'm at my wit's end. They've been following me all day, taking my son to a friend of mine's for a play date with their child, to the grocery store, and to the eye doctor. I don't know what they'll do to me, and I'm terrified they'll hurt my son. Jake called and told me he wouldn't be home for most of the week, work being too backed up or something. We're in this house alone, and worst of all is the last few words my son spoke to me last night. "Mommy, why are the tall men staying in our house?" Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to the Justinio Reads podcast. If you enjoyed and have stories of your own you'd like to share, send them to justinioreads@yahoo.com to be featured in a future episode. That's JUSTINIO reads@yahoo.com. Have a great night, folks.